Morning everybody and welcome to the second episode of Soundbyte. Today we're going to go through why innovation is important to the construction industry and why we shouldn't forget it. And then the second part is what is ConTech? So what does that actually mean for Hong Kong? As always, it's presented by me, James Thompson. I am the founder of GC Digital, and I've got around 20 years in BIM and construction. So today we're going to talk about what is ConTech and why is innovation important to the construction industry. ConTech, in short, is the same as what PropTech is to construction, essentially. So construction technologies. When we say construction technologies, we mean software, hardware, and any digital tools that aid the construction process. These construction tools could be anything from an IoT sensor through to a digital platform, through to BIM. The whole ecosystem of these technologies is known as ConTech. So why would we use ConTech? So ConTech should be making our construction sites safer, smarter, more productive, more sustainable. We're just going to focus on 4 areas which essentially are prevalent in the Hong Kong construction sector. Maybe interesting to some of my international viewers, but also relevant to anybody who is trying to find out more information about the Hong Kong construction market. So we'll start this off with the first thing. Regardless of whether it's ConTech, PropTech, manufacturing tech, fintech, it all starts with a good innovation strategy. The one which I would recommend to everybody is the ISO 56002, and that one essentially breaks down innovation management into 8 different sections. Now those 8 different sections have different parts, but essentially when we're looking at each of those, it's really important that there's a good description and that there is a KPI or an OKR. When I say KPI, I mean key performance indicator, or OKR meaning objective key result. The definition of these KPIs is important at each stage, just to keep everybody on the same page and make sure that there's no misunderstanding about what you're actually trying to achieve from each of these innovations. This model should form the backbone of your innovation management strategy. The innovation management strategy should be tied to the corporate business goals and not as a separate team or a separate implementation project, essentially. The best approach is to have a portfolio of projects that essentially can work through these 8 stages. And if one is failing any one of these 8 stages, then the idea is to try to fail that one fast. Getting the collaboration between the different parties in the business is really fundamental to making your innovation management system work. And that collaboration between business stakeholders, subject matter experts, tech people, engineers is really, really important for each one of these projects. And actually, from a leadership perspective, assigning somebody responsible or accountable is really important to each step of that process. And what you'll find is that the person accountable or the person responsible changes as you go through this 8-stage process. But the most important thing to take away from this part is that you've got a strategy and a structure that follows a governance process that you can say whether something is working or something is not. Okay, so the next one is the Digital Work Supervision System. In Hong Kong, we call it DWSS. Now, there's lots of platforms out there that do DWSS. I'm not going to name any of them. But essentially, the genesis of it is digitizing the works records, essentially. So whether that is anything to do with QA, cleansing, anything to do with, some of the safety and environmental modules, also looking at things like progress monitoring, labour allocation. There's a lot of different items that appear in DWSS, but I think there's 5 core ones. The thing I do know where companies fail in this aspect essentially is around the forms management side. So it's really important that you digitize those forms and you standardize them, and the inspection test plan regime behind it that actually founds it. So I think the key takeaway from the DWSS side is anything that is a paper-based process that's on the project, you should try to digitize that into some kind of e-form that goes through a standard process that everybody's happy on the project, so the contractor, the customer. This should become one of the decision-making platforms for the project, but regularly just becomes a dumping ground for risk forms and other things. So if you are going to make this work, having the client's backing is really, really important on this one. I know a lot of the contractors try to get away with using different systems, but I think it's really, really important to follow the client's requirements for the DWSS in order to make it successful. A new one in Hong Kong, well, not really new, a couple of years, 2-3 years, is the Smart Site Safety System. Now, this was brought about by using technology to improve the safety on the construction sites. But the 4S has got a core guiding principle, which essentially is to utilize technology to make our construction sites safer. Some examples of that technology would be having the 3D model visible at different stages, so you can understand what the construction project should be like, and you can do virtual rehearsals. Others around IoT, so having smart helmets to track the worker well-being or worker position. Other ones such as confined space monitoring or crane clearances and fatal zone detection. All those types of things are part of this CMP that rolls into the 4S platform. One important part of the Smart Site Safety System is the 4S labelling system, which essentially gives the contractor or the construction project owner a bit more flexibility in terms of the industry knowing that they're using this technology to overcome these issues. So that is a really good mandate that CIC have put forward, and I think that is something which will add value to this space. A core data set underneath this is also BIM. So any of that 3D geometry or 2D drawings or the requirements or the execution of that sort of central process through the CDE is a foundational repository that the 4S platform and the DWSS platforms feed into. So it's really important that you've established that CDE, you've established what document management system is going to be feeding it, and also what you're going to use the model for. Because I've seen a lot of companies, certainly over the years, where they've tried to recreate things like 4D modeling inside their 4S platform, and the cost of developing that technology is astronomical. So I would say steer clear of any of the more graphically intense things when it comes to BIM or the 4S platform, and try to really focus on the more closed loop systems where it's, you know, using let's say the 3D model to overlay a sensor. The sensor has a threshold. If the threshold gets exceeded, then the sensor raises an alert. The alert then triggers a process for, you know, for a person to go out and check that, and then once the person's checked it and checked it's okay, then it releases the alert, and then that sensor essentially is no longer read inside the model. So that would be a circular process that utilizes the 4S platform through BIM, through the IoT sensor, through the DWSS system, and then back into the platform. So I see this one a lot. Data-driven decision making. This isn't printing off a piece of paper and giving it to your executive director for him to say yes or no, or your project director to say yes or no. Essentially, this should be foresight into where the project is going and any of those weak signals that you see across that project. So that can come from multiple places. It can come from the way people are talking about things, the semantics around people filling in the site diaries, you know, how fast people are approving permits. If they're approving permits within 10 seconds, you've probably got a safety issue. And also things like the BIM, you know, are we scanning the project and then the scan is a million miles away from what the 4D model said it should be at this point in time. So all of these data that you're collecting on the project are essentially in different layers, and those different data sets, when you combine them together, give you lots of different value opportunities you can capture for data-driven decision making, and also give you a foresight into what you can do or where you are with your project or where you're going to be with that project. This doesn't replace good project controls. This is purely a way of reducing people reporting and replacing it with some kind of automated reporting process that triggers an action. If it's just to record the dashboard, then in my opinion, you're not getting the value out of it, because you should, well, it's a good thing to have a dashboard, but you should be triggering an action or a response to get that closed loop approach. So these layers of data should inform a process or trigger a process that means that your business can execute something that would have been a manual process before, and that's how you'll get the value out of it. One thing for a company which I've seen recently is they keep the legacy process as well, because they don't trust the technology, and that is even worse, because then you end up with this parallel process which is just adding cost and waste to your project. Okay, so final point. I think this saying used to be, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. But I think it should be, if you can measure it, you can manage it. If you've got a team of 50 people and 2 of them are wearing smart helmets, you cannot collect the data. This is a foundational step. So if you want to get the value out of any of these platform technologies, it is very, very important that you enable them with the feeding technologies, essentially. So that would be sensors, that would be, using the right document management system, or using the right CDE for managing the models, or using the correct CCTV camera network that has AI enabled on it. These are non-negotiables, and if you don't have them, then it's exponentially worse as you try to go through this platform transformation. But let's say you've got all of these technologies and you're collecting all of this data and you've established these processes. How do I know I'm getting the value out of the technology? And the only way you can do that is to essentially use a management consulting technique, essentially, which is to baseline where you were traditionally, and then to come up with a new metric which gives you or a projection, a benchmark that you're aiming at. And then essentially what you can do is you can measure between them. So if the cycle time of a site foreman going out to look at an incident was originally 5 minutes, then essentially you're using an AI CCTV camera and you can see somebody's tripped over, then that response rate should be exponentially faster. And because you're able to get there faster, you should be able to return some tangible value back to the business. Another way you can use it is for the number of people you have undertaking those tasks. So if now you can automate 50% of those tasks, you may set your benchmark as a 50% people reduction, let's say, and then measure that. Let's say you've got 10 people, now you can do it with 5. So essentially you start to trim and trim and trim and trim, and hopefully you hit that benchmark. So if it is a people reducing project with automation, there's plenty of other projects and plenty of other activities that those people could be doing that are heavily value adding, as opposed to these manual processes that could be automated. So I think this is where everybody needs to buy into this technological revolution. And if you get that, then you'll progress really, really quickly. If you get a lot of resistance and a lot of parallel processing, then you'll really struggle to hit these benchmarks. Another saying is this: culture eats strategy for breakfast. I do believe that, and essentially it's really important that you get that adoption from the people, and the refocusing so you don't end up with that parallel processing. So in summary, there's lots of areas of digitalization. ConTech just means construction technologies, the same as PropTech means property technologies. So don't be afraid of that term. It's really important you've got an innovation management strategy or a digital strategy. These two governance processes will help you recognize value at each of these stages and get the buy-in from all the relevant people or responsible people along the way. And those people will change as you go through that process. Then there's more boring ones like the DWSS, which is more around digitizing these paper processes. More glamorous ones like the 4S, which are platform technologies that are using data, sensors, and drawing all of that information into a central platform. It uses the more traditional technologies, let's say, like BIM or visualizations, 4D, 5D, or the CDE. All of those repositories need to be hooked up to this 4S or centralized management platform. And then once you've got that, and once you've got that data process going on, you essentially really need to make sure that you're building in these circular closed loop processes in order to get the value out of it. And then once you're starting to build these processes, set up what are the key benefits from it so people can start to see it in the business and bring it up to the top table. So just remember, you'll only get the dollar saving once you remove the old process or you lower the number of people it takes to do that activity, essentially. So that's it from me today. So just a plug for my company. So I work as part of a team of a few people, which are called GC Digital. In GC Digital, we offer advisory services on strategy and innovation management. We also take startups and take them through an incubation process or localize them for the Hong Kong market. Also, the other way around, we're starting to see that some of these technologies want to go global and want to use this platform and some of our networks to actually push those more international. So we do offer those advisory services and those innovation management services. In some instances, we do offer some products. We've got 9 products now. Those products are primarily focused on the topics we've just discussed. So AEC technologies, DWSS technologies, or actually form building technologies and e-signature, and the CMP side, so the platform technologies, IoT sensors, all of that stuff. So that's all I've got time for today. So thank you for joining along. So next week will be a different format. We'll be undertaking an interview with a service provider who will be looking at the impacts of AI on their industry and also how that is affecting their business and how they're getting the value of using those technologies such as AI, Gen AI, in their business processes. So exciting episode next week. Please make sure you sign in. If you haven't before, please like, subscribe, comment, turn notifications on everywhere. It's really important. It helps me grow. It helps the channel grow. And if you do have any consulting needs or any products which you're interested in that are available on our website, please drop us an email and we'll be happy to help. All right. See you next week. Bye.